T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, I am not only joined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Alex Myers, but we are joined by Codyjoe McEwen from the Reptile shop in Canada. And we have a lot to talk about tonight. He breeds a wide variety of some of the coolest reptile species in the world, including but not limited to Papuan pythons, ring pythons, olive pythons, quince monitors, Dominican red mountain boas, and many, many more. We have a lot to get into. But before that, as always, USARK. So for those of you who are unaware, USARK is the organization in the United States that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to pursue this way of life. Check out usark.org for all of the relevant information you need to know about the organization. And if you are not already, please look into becoming a member. As a community, we have strength in numbers, so the more people that are behind the cause, the better. And tonight we are brought to you by Mark Bailey Reptiles. For any of you who are in the ball python game, really in the reptile industry in general, Mark Bailey is a name you should know. He has been an OG of the game. He's been doing this longer than many of us have probably been alive. And he has been leading the way in the designer ball python market for many years now. So if ball pythons are your thing, please check out Mark Bailey Reptiles for some of the absolute best stuff on the market today. And we are also brought to you by Elijah Armas of JUGGERNAUT Reptiles, another industry leader in this instance in the blood and short-tail python game. They also work with ball pythons, green anacondas, and a number of other species as well. But particularly for the bloods and short-tails, please check out JUGGERNAUT Reptiles. And you can find them on all different forms of social media to check up on what they are doing. And last but not least, we are brought to you by Blake's Exotic Feeders. If you are here in the United States and are looking for quail to feed to your reptiles, please check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. They hand raise all of their quail in their facility here in the United States, so you know you're getting a good quality product from a US-based source. Once again, for feeder quail, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. And here we are. Time for another episode. And I guess without further ado, I'll introduce my co-host. He is a man of mystery. He goes by many names. Some call him the Pundit of the Philippines. Some call him the Sultan of Sulawesi. Some call him the Master of Moluccas or the Sultan of Sailfin Dragons. I think I said Sultan already. Either way, Mr. Alex Myers. He is here. And his mic is muted. Unmute yourself.
There we go. There we go. Yes. Thank you for the grand intro. I feel like I thought there was a Retic podcast that I think introduced Jake Klotz as the Sultan of Sulawesi because he brought in or like he was part of some of the original Sulawesi mainland Retics that came in. So I just had a quick.
Man, I thought I was so original, but yet I'm a hack. I just stole that.
Master of the Moluccas has a nice ring to it. I mean, you've got Amboinensis, the sailfin, and then you've got Clastolepis, the scrub python from the Moluccas.
The one that I actually meant to say that I did not say was the savior of sailfin dragons. That was what I was going to say. So, all right. Anyway,
savior.
Without that said,
I'm Jesus for the sailfins now.
Well,
you are forgiven.
So how's everything going, man?
Pretty good. Things are getting built all around here. I want to say from the last episode, you had me co-host on with Casey. I was just sort of in the process of getting all my enclosures finalized, and they're finalized now. So the plan is to pick up all my lizards at Tinley. I've got some of my water dragons that were in the sort of like on loan with a really good friend of mine through college. So I'll be getting all my water dragons back, aside from the 2 that I currently have here that I brought from my parents' place back in Chicago. And then the sailfins will be
Not
moving.
in Chicago. I can't let you get away with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you tell people,
it's gonna mean nothing to anyone who isn't from Chicago, but you can't say that.
I don't live in the city, but it's Chicagoland area, northwest suburbs.
Yeah, you could have said that, and we wouldn't have to go through this. You could have just said, all right. Anyway,
it's an Illinois thing to everybody listening. All jokes aside, all the lizards are going to be moved up here by Tinley weekend, and it's super exciting. So hopefully next year some things will be rocking. I'm trying not to get my hopes up too high, just because I've heard horror stories of, when you move a collection, it takes time for things to adjust. But either way, I'm just happy to be rocking out and to spend every day in the company of some of the most amazing lizards in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah. So this coming year, what are your main focuses? What do you think that you have a shot at producing?
Chinese water dragons and Philippine sailfin dragons.
All right.
Yeah. Maybe Sulawesi black sailfins, but I got eggs this year from the female, but the male is still a little bit smaller. He's in with her too. They're in a nice big setup, but I think he needs about another year of growth. I even sent some photos of him to Scott Corning and Casey, and they both told me the same thing. He just needs to get a little bit bigger on him, but he's been responding well to my I do mirror tests. So if I put a mirror in front of him, if he thinks it's another male, he's finally getting to the point now where he flares up. So I think some of those testosterone's picking up. He's starting to blossom into a nice mature male, but not going to, put a pin in it until there's actually fertile eggs on the ground. So I'm just going to hope for some Philippine sailfins next year. And if I can't produce water dragons next year, I fail, because I've got 2 groups. So one female has to go, at least one, and I'd hopefully, all 5, but we'll see.
So what do you have the ratios at for your groups?
One group's 1.3, the other one's 1.2.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I have my my old girl that I've had since the start. She's not with a male at this time, but she's just hanging around. I've had her 11 years now, actually, this week. So she laid eggs last year. She had kind of iffy success, and that's why I didn't produce a ton, because she was the only one that I put with a male last year. But like I said, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a nice young group. Pretty much all wild caught animals that I've got as neonates that have raised up. So it's not like I'm taking fresh adults out of the wild, and at the same time now they've been in captivity for the past 2 years, and I'm hoping the stars align with them. Okay.
Are you going to try to breed your old female, or is she kind of retired for you?
Maybe next year. I'm honestly just, not to sound super negative, hoping she survives the move. Just because I've heard, again, some of those horror stories where when you have an animal in captivity in the same area for so long, I mean, she's practically been living in the same place for 10 years. Sure. Not sure how well the move's going to be on her. So I just want to keep her around as long as possible first before trying to breed her,
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. It's exciting.
Yeah.
More lizards.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people I know are going to be pulling for you, but for you to finally crack the sailfin egg, so to speak, that'll be huge.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything yet until I get ideally babies hatching, but I've spent a lot of time, and many sailfin keepers can attest to this, specifically with the Philippines. All 4 that I'll have lined up will be, I can trace them back to animals that have come in wild caught from the 90s or mid 2000s. So that's as pure as Philippines will get. There's no, he said, they said, she said, I bought it from my uncle. No, that's very good paper trail. I've got documentation, whether it's, old fauna ads, and I can see who sold to who, or even physical paperwork for one of the animals. So I'm really excited, because, that's about, again, as pure and legit as Philippine sailfins can get.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, I'm glad for a lot of reasons that you're doing that, but definitely that you've taken that approach. But without further ado, let's let everyone know who everything about this guest that we're about to bring on.
Yeah. So Codyjoe, I first heard of him, there's a YouTuber out there named Mike Taitula, really awesome content creator. And Mike did this video. It was like the rarest reptiles of Canada, and it was of Codyjoe's collection. And I had, between seeing animals you had brought in when I was living in Illinois when we were younger, you sort of opened my eyes to some of the more uncommon snakes. White lips, the Bismarck rings, and this video of Cody's collection. I mean, this man had blackheads, womas. I remember he was working with water pythons, Lyasis fuscus, maclots, and he just had a lot of cool snakes where when I was watching that video, I was like, this guy, he knows what he likes. He knows what he's working with. It was a really impressive collection. And on top of that, I was working at a local reptile and fish store throughout high school. So, he keeps freshwater stingrays, which anybody listening on the podcast, whether you're listening to this on audio or you're tuned into the live stream right now, if you keep fish, stingrays are not the easiest animals to maintain. They're very picky about their water parameters. So for some guy to be balancing Indo-Australian pythons and then his monitor lizard collection, to my knowledge, I think he is the only person in Canada that has bred Foranus indicus, or the mangrove monitor. And he might be one of a handful of people that have bred Keents. I know he's the guy breeding the Keents or the yellow monitor in Canada, like frequently. I don't know if there's a couple others, but again, just indicus complex monitors, Indo-Australian pythons, and then throw in freshwater stingrays. I mean, he's doing everything and he's kicking ass at it. So just somebody that totally gotta, hear his thoughts, hear his work, and somebody that deserves to be on Kush'S Korner.
Well, with that incredible introduction, without further ado, let's bring Mr. Codyjoe on the podcast.
How's it going, guys?
Pretty good. How you doing, man?
Good. Appreciate the intro.
Yep. Welcome, man.
Well, dude, thank you for your time tonight. This is definitely this is one that I'm excited about now. This is going to be a hell of a show.
Of course. Yeah. Morelia Python Radio and this are the two podcasts I listen to.
Hell yeah. All right. Cool. That's some pretty damn good company. So for everyone who's watching or listening who isn't familiar with you already, kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of your life and times in this hobby.
Yeah, so currently I own a store in Canada, obviously, in Red Deer, Alberta. It's just called the Reptile Shop. And I've got the whole building, like I live on the top, and then I've got like 7,000 square feet and probably like 1,200 square feet maybe is a retail store.
Okay.
And the rest of it is all just breeding.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that. I work with a lot of more obscure pythons and boas, a lot of monitor lizards, and then just kind of a few other odds and ends in there. I started out initially keeping as like a young kid, and then I started vending expos when I was 11. I was breeding bibrons geckos, and then I got into breeding basilisks and water dragons and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, I just transitioned more to snakes. And yeah, here we are, just kind of escalated.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the stingrays. Those I've only been working with since like 2012-ish, somewhere in there. That was kind of a sidetrack thing. I was working at Petland at the time, and a guy came in and I couldn't understand him. He spoke Chinese or something. And I thought he asked if you had food for arowanas. And I said, yes. And then he turned around and walked away. And then he comes back with a big bucket with a big arowana in it. And then my boss told me that I could take it home. And then that's kind of what unexpectedly got me into the fish side of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. You guys can keep Asian arowana up there.
Oh, yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't keep those in the United States. The place I worked at, though, we got in about every arowana. I mean, we had silvers. We had then the blue phase and the black phase of the silvers. But they just get so big. And it sucks because then all, in my opinion, those cool, like the Asian arowana at, say, around 2 feet, we could get in Jardinis. And I think we had one time, I want to say it was a Nile arowana or one of the African arowana. Whatever they come in as, but I see all you guys posting those nice high reds and oranges, and I want those so bad, but can't keep them.
Yeah, and in the States, you guys can't have Fiji iguanas either, right?
No, sir.
It's so weird. That's weird.
Yeah, the Endangered Species Act is one of the most strange pieces of legislation that we have. It just there's not a whole lot of logic to it.
Yeah.
You can break it down in about 30 seconds, where anyone without any information on it's like, wow, that doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't help anything. Like for native species, sure, but for a Fijian iguana,
Yeah, like you might as well have people breeding them in captivity like crazy out there, because then there's no reason to try and do anything shady.
yeah, and then what ends up happening is that some zoos have them, and they're, at least from my understanding, they're not particularly difficult animals to breed. I mean, I can't imagine the thousands of eggs that have been just thrown away over the years, because what the hell would they be able to do with all of these if they hatched?
Yeah, I've heard of a few zoos that are just like almost like overrun with them. Because what do you do?
Yeah, and for like an threatened to endangered species, the logic there is so backwards. like these are, I mean, why not even try to look into some sort of reintroduction type of program instead of just drop them in the garbage and wait until their next cycle to throw away more eggs or whatever?
It seems like they always do that. Yeah, they don't let the private sector help with anything. But.
Yeah. I mean, but it is what it is, though. We have to live with our restrictions and whatnot. But before we get into like any animal talk specifically, what's it like running a reptile shop up there? I don't really know much about the Canadian market. I mean, obviously, I assume you do well, but to me, that seems like a concept that probably takes the right location to really do well. Do you do a lot of online stuff, or is it more in person?
So I always explain it like I'm just a snake breeder. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a business guy at all. I hate those sides of it. I just want to breed animals. So I do online stuff. Like for the most part, people reach out to me, and I seem to be able to move things pretty good that way. I could do better in the sense of like website wise and all of that.
Sure.
But it works good just by reputation.
Okay.
The market, I would say, is fairly similar, right? It's just way smaller. So
sure.
If you take the population that you guys have out there, right, the percentage that is into the weird species, it's the same here, just a lot smaller of a pool of people.
Sure.
So yeah, I would say it's quite similar. We don't have like the same market for like venomous or like giant animals and stuff, because there's only a few places in Canada that you can have any of that. But it's pretty well similar. Where I ended up in Red Deer is I was originally from Calgary.
Okay.
And we kind of had my girlfriend at the time, we had like a 5-year plan to open a store in Red Deer. Because Red Deer is between Edmonton and Calgary, which are the two biggest cities really in Alberta. And there was nothing here. And I always seen posts of people asking if somebody could transport supplies from Calgary or Edmonton. So I knew there was a need for it.
Sure.
And I didn't even know anybody in Red Deer. That was just the only reason why I wanted to come here. But then we had an investigator from the city come to our house one morning. And it was initially, I don't know what led him there, but it was originally because I was breeding stingrays in the garage. And then when I opened the door, like it was a big house, and it had like one of those kind of secondary living room or dining room in the front when the door. Yeah. And that was all monitors and stuff. And so he's seen the size of the reptile operation. And I guess it was a business apparently. So they wanted us to pay for this Class 2 land permit that would enable us to run a business out of the house. But it only enabled you to use up to 20% of the square footage, and I was using the whole place. This was the house that Mike Taitula tour was in. It was that house. And all in, it was like $700 to keep applying, and I was like, well, dude, it's not going to get approved. And he's like, well, you just keep trying and hopefully it gets approved. So, and then on top of that, my landlord was just a property manager, and he wanted me to forge a letter of permission to the city from the homeowner. So the whole thing was a mess. So we just, we found this building in Red Deer, and then like almost over the weekend quit our jobs of 9 years. And then we didn't even have any savings or anything. Like, we're broke. And we just moved out here, and I turned most of the cages I have in the store now, I had tree boas in. So I put those in tubs and then use those for the store. And then I obviously had a lot of supplies, and then I just kind of escalated from there. But that's how I ended up in Red Deer. Just there's no competition, right? There's a pet land, smart, and that's it.
Okay.
So, and then currently I'm only selling within Canada, but I'm quite motivated to find outlets to start exporting. I would like to start doing big group shipments and exporting.
Yeah.
There's just more demand out there for that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem impossible. From my understanding, it's almost it's harder for us to get animals to you than it is for you to get animals to us. Correct?
It seems like it. Yeah. There's a handful of like big full-time breeders in Canada, and they don't even really mess with Canadians very much. They export everything.
Yeah. Like Ash.
Yeah. And it's doable, man. Like,
yeah.
So that's what I would like to move towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, especially with the obscure pythons and whatnot, I feel like that would be pretty easy for you, all things considered. Just, I mean, this year, I'm not sure where you'd be able to find. I mean, if it's not Ryan Young, you're not getting Apodora. For ring pythons, maybe there'll be a couple of clutches, you know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of decent demand out here for those things.
Yeah, you'd think, like, to be honest, my end goal, like I said, I'm not really a business guy. The store, my end goal, a dream would be if I could get to the point in breeding where I could just do that and not have a public store. Just have a property with a facility, and then export and stuff and do expos. That would be my end goal. Yeah,
for sure. So are you running mostly supplies out of your store now, or is it a decent amount of animal sales as well?
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of a lot of pet stores. I'm very heavy on the animal side.
Okay.
And then I have all of the dry goods and stuff too, but it's probably heavier on the animal side. To be honest. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely not what you typically hear from someone running a pet store. So.
No, yeah. And I mean, the feeders and everything is that's where a lot of the day-to-day income is from.
Sure.
But same thing, like, I mean, out here, there's nowhere local that sells, you know, PVC cages or any decent supplies other than what the big box stores would sell, right?
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's definitely, I'd say, heavier on the animal side.
Okay. Hey, that's awesome. Well, cool, man. But so I want to jump into these Apodora.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me kind of about how the project all came to be. When did you start keeping them, and then how did the that turn into breeding them?
So when I was a kid, I would always be looking online for pictures of them and stuff. And I seen Nerd back in the day on their website had pictures of Papuans and stuff.
Yeah.
And I read that he bred them a few times. Like, this was, I don't even know. This was 20 years ago.
Yeah, early 2000s.
Yeah. And so I would always look at them on there, and I just thought they were crazy. And the only ones I had ever seen there was a guy out here who had, I don't even know, probably between 4 and 6 of them.
Okay.
And he would occasionally bring one on display at the reptile shows. So I'd always want them from then. And I even at one point tried to sell my whole collection because there was a guy in the US selling a pair. And it was cheap. It was like $1,200. But I was like 12 years old, so it was a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
But he wouldn't ship it to me in Canada. So after that, I kind of just waited. And then in 2013, I got access to an Indonesia import list. And it was like, I didn't want to look at the thing to begin with because I knew all my dream species were on there and it was going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And they were on there. At the time, too, adult Boland's pythons were $1,700 Canadian. And I was like, well, I'll hold off till next year. And so I ended up selling a whole bunch of stuff. And then I ordered really all that stuff, Papuans and Sabus and flying snakes and black white lips and all that. Yeah. And I got initially, I think the first time I just ordered a pair, and they had sent me like a 12-foot female and like a, I don't know, he's probably like a 6-foot male.
Okay.
And I got this stuff, and I was living just on the main floor of this house. And I quarantined it all in my bedroom. And I had racks with all the white lips and Sabus and all that stuff in there. And then I had some big bins with the Papuans in there. Mm-hmm. And I had gone away for the weekend. And when I had got back, my roommate, he called me and he was in the yard yelling, and he was scared of snakes. And he had my bedroom door all taped up, and he was screaming because there were snakes everywhere. One of these Papuans had busted out of the bin, and it went down the back of this rack and let out all these snakes. Yeah. And I thought it ate all the Sabus and white lips and everything. But surprisingly it didn't. I found them all. And there was like shed skin everywhere. It was crazy. And I found this Papuan python, and it was like, it had a big stiff spot in it. And then when you move the snake around, if you shook it, like you could hear something kind of jingling in it. And I had a probe set that was in this plastic tube, and it ate this whole tube with a probe set in it. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was trying to get into the vet, and I couldn't get it in. And then like 4 or 5 days later, luckily it passed this tube full of probes. But out of all the snakes and everything in the room, it decided to just eat a big plastic tube full of probes. So, I mean, they say they're smart, but they're stupid.
Did the probe still work?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. a little slimy, but
yeah.
So that was the first pair I got. And the male was he was so scarred up and like he was beat up. So I ended up replacing him. And then I did those orders every year.
Okay.
That's where I built kind of all of my Indo Python collection. This is where I built my collection now.
Okay.
That was initial Indo imports. And the next year or 2 years later, I think it was the next year, I ordered another pair, and then I think I only got one. Okay. And then I ended up, the year after, a buddy of mine had got a pair out of Indo as well. So I ended up getting those. And so fast forward to now 6 years ago, I guess, I got my buddy's pair, and there was a 12-foot female and then, 12-foot female and then a young female. And when he got it, she was probably maybe 2 years old, probably eating smaller medium rats. You know what I mean? She was just a little one.
Sure.
And my male was same. He was my new male. He was 6 feet maybe when I got him. So I had that young pair and then my 2 12-foot females.
Okay.
And I had tried to pair that male to my 2 12-foot females successfully without him getting eaten.
Wow.
For 2 seasons, and I had lots of copulations. The females blew up, were laying inverted off food. Nothing ever came of it. And then whatever it was, 2 years ago now, I had tried to pair him again to one of my big females because I had lost my original one, actually.
Okay.
She was just dead one day. So I tried to pair to the other big female again. And then my younger female, who I was going to give a little bit more time, she's a psycho. You touch the door and she comes across an 8-foot enclosure, just ready. And you open it and she bites onto anything she touches and throws coils. Like she's a nutcase. And I seen the one day she was sitting there with just her head poking out of the hide. And when I opened the door, she pulled her head in, which is not like her. Sorry, my dog's snoring. And when I lifted the hide off, she was in this tight coil. And I touched her and she just hit her head again, which was strange. So I pulled her out and palpated, and I could feel like 8 big follicles.
Yeah.
So I pulled the male from the big female and paired them up. And then he was all over her, and she was kind of just trying to get away.
Mm.
And then within, I think it was like 3-4 days, which was January 27th, I got the first copulation. So, and shortly after that, my other 12-foot female just blew up with this crazy. She was hacking up stuff, and I got her on injections and everything. And she ended up passing as well. And then I sent her in for necropsy, and she had all kinds of stuff going on internally, whether she had cancer or what. But
yeah, that sucks.
So those big old adult females, they were no good. I never had any luck with them.
Yeah.
It was the pair that I had raised up from like 6-foot range.
Yeah.
That produced. And then, yeah, they were, so that pair basically, like I have kind of my notes. January 27th, they locked, and they locked all the way through till the end of February. And
okay.
Then I have noted, they're kind of random notes, big swell, inverted, and tight coil. And then mid-March, first basking in 2 weeks, because she was, at that point, I was kind of transitioning to just ambient keeping.
Okay.
She had a mild basking spot of like 86 degrees. And she never used it. And then March 13th, I have her down as ovulating. And then I just wrote down from there, right? So that was March 13th. I thought she ovulated. March 17th, warm side off of the pad, body temperature 85.6. The next day, she was on the cool side. Her body temperature was 83.4, and the floor temp was 79.3. So she was always, like 3 to 5 degrees above the surrounding temperature, right? And then I have so many notes from there, right? Like hot side, body temp, 82.4. I didn't write the times of day, right? Because it fluctuates. But she was always between 80 and 84. Until the end of March, she was on the cold side, and she was 86.7. So she must have come off the heat, maybe.
Yeah.
But then by the end of March, she was in full blue. Come April, she was on the hot side a lot more. And then April 27th, she shed and started wandering. And then by May 12th, she laid 7 eggs and 1 slug. So it's like relatively typical python stuff.
She was in shed for quite a while then, huh?
She was, yeah. So she, where did I go here? Oh yeah, March, full blue, cool side, blah, blah, blah. No, okay, this is what threw me off. April 4th, she shed, right?
Okay.
And then April 27th, she shed again. So I didn't know which was her prelay shed, right? I didn't know when to expect the eggs.
So that's very atypical python progression.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that was what threw me off.
Yeah. I feel like at that point I would have been like, oh shit, she's not gravid.
Yeah, toast.
Yeah.
But you could literally, when she was slithering,
You
didn't even have to. You could count the eggs when she was slithering.
Wow.
Like they were, and then the eggs were 165 grams.
They're like significantly giant.
Oh, dude, they're like,
Yeah.
like your whole hand.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And yeah, like the rest was pretty typical, but there was twice her body temperature was 86, and the rest of the time it was 80 to 83.
Okay. Interesting. So would you figure that she would kind of like go to the basking spot for a bit, warm up, leave, and kind of just regulate her temperature that way?
Yeah, and when she was on the hot side basking, she was off of the pad. She was beside it.
Okay.
And the pad only got to 86.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting, but yeah, she was always warmer than wherever she was. And then I tried to breed her back-to-back years. I tried to breed her the next year too. And it was the same thing, same time of year. Yeah, like start of January, she was in that tight coil, not aggressive at all, didn't want to eat. You go in there, she would hide her head, palpate her, she had follicles. And I paired them up, and then just nothing came of it. But I was super busy at that time, and I think I waited a little bit too long. I think to begin with, I caught it at the tail end of it. Yeah. And then the second time around, I didn't get anything. So this year, I actually, just after I hatched the clutch, I acquired another adult pair.
Okay.
And that female was also raised from like this 6-7 foot range, I think.
Okay.
And the male was like 12 feet. So like when they were wild caught.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah. So this season I'll be doing 2 separate pairs.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I kept out of those babies I produced, 1 egg went bad at the end of incubation.
Okay.
There's a full-term baby dead. And then I wound up with 5 males and 1 female. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought it would be the other way around just because the way they come in out of the wild, right? Like you never get males.
Yeah, is that true? Because I've always heard that, and after I've only ever had a few, but to me it was like that sounds like a great way to sell lone males.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Is just say that you can't get them. So here's a male, you better get it while you can.
I mean, that could be the case. I know for me, anytime I ordered a pair, they would send just like a 6-foot animal and a 12-foot animal. Every time it was like the same. Well, it was like 3 times it happened.
Sure.
And it was the same even if you order a pair of babies, there'd be like a 6-footer and a 12-footer. And most of the times it would be 2 females.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know. It could be like the Boland's thing, too, like where the males are just elsewhere from who knows.
Yeah.
But I talked to other guys and God, I can't remember who had what odds, but I think that other guy, Kevin or something in the US, I think he had pretty split clutch. And then I think, if I remember correctly, I think Casper had the opposite of me, more females than males. So I think it's just up in the air.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I kept the only female and a male.
Sure.
So now I have 3.3.
I forget what Ryan got this year, but
I think he was the same. I think he only got 1 female and
oh, really?
2 males or something.
Okay.
I believe he had the same issue as me.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. How long was the incubation period on them?
90 days.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And I talked to, I believe Casper was very big on incubating cool. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Kevin guy went 90 degrees. And so I just decided not to change anything. My incubator is, I think, 87.3. Okay.
Yeah.
I just left it there. And they all got 90 days. Mine were 90 days. So no difference. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me that with a lot of these pythons, I don't know, the more time goes by, the more stuff I breed and the more like I pay attention to other people. I think that gestation determines so much more than incubation does as far as viability and whatnot. Like for instance, with scrub pythons, I mean, people have hatched healthy babies between like 84 degrees and like 92 degrees.
Yeah.
And I know somebody in the UK who hatched them, had a clutch hatch like before day 60, which is completely unheard of, considering that typically it's like
80,
condo stuff. It's like 80 to 90 days is normal. And I had one hatch on 97 this year, so a legitimate 40-day window.
Yeah.
Crazy. but both ways, the babies were fine. And
what did you incubate at?
I was at 86 this year. I'll probably bump it a little bit next year, but not a lot. Maybe like 86 and a half or something like that.
Yeah. I feel like they don't need it that warm.
No, definitely not. And I think it also then will come down to your egg box configuration and, you know, how loaded you have a single box or whatnot. So
yeah.
Because I bet those Apodora eggs put off a decent amount of heat and respirers. Right?
Speaking of that, I split them between. I think I split them between 2 boxes.
Okay.
And the one that had the extra egg hatched like a week before the other one.
Really?
Yeah, actually, like I did a YouTube video like when they were hatching, and I couldn't show them all because I waited for like a week and they were still just hatching.
Yeah.
So they were so spread out, I had already put half of them in tubs like by the time the other box hatched.
Yeah.
I noticed that too. Yeah, you got one box loaded. I had that with queen spawners actually like a few weeks ago. A clutches were like a week and a half apart. One clutch.
Really?
The box had less eggs in it. Yeah.
Wow. But do you see any difference in the viability of the hatchlings one way or the other?
No.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, even with those quints, the only baby that had a little umbilical still attached was one of the babies that hatched later.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't find any difference. Yeah.
It's also interesting. I feel like a lot of what you hear is that incubating cooler is better, and it makes sense kind of, but I feel like I hear so many different examples where it totally debunks that. For instance, right now,
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder.
Yeah, you hear that too with like cooling species, right? You hear so many guys are like, you can't breed that species without freezing it out. Like you got to get it so cold. And it's like, man, I know guys who breed those every year without really doing night drops. Like, so it's like I had a buddy who bred diamond pythons every year without really doing any crazy night drops.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's also interesting to me that there's some colubrids, like if you don't brumate them, you're just going to shorten their lifespan. There are some reptiles that just need that, but like even Scott Flood with his Boland's pythons, I spoke to him at the Dallas Expo a couple weeks ago, and I mean the way that he does it compared to what people were waxing poetic about for years beforehand, it's like if he showed up in the comment section, everyone would have been like, "You're an idiot, shut up," and he's like, "Here's my multiple clutches, repeated years of Boland's pythons. Fuck you guys." So,
I gotta ask. He hasn't been on here, has he?
No, I'd like to. He said that his internet is poor out where he is. He did a quick interview with MJ on the live. I think he recorded some live podcasts at Dallas. I don't know if that's out yet or not, but he did definitely do an interview. But
that would be a phenomenal episode.
Yeah, that would be. And if Scott, if you're listening, the pressure's on. So
yeah, we're waiting.
So that's awesome. But so do you approach breeding with your pythons kind of the same way across the board with all the different species that you have?
Pretty well. I've been in a transitional phase. So previously I was all basking lights or belly heat. I honestly hate belly heat. I just hate heat tape, to be honest. But I was basking lights and then like a lower ambient. So it was more extremes on either end, right? And then over the years, and I pretty well have done everything the same. I always did my olive pythons a little bit warmer than, say, my white lips or whatever, right?
Sure.
Some species need more humidity, but I pretty well did them all the same across the board, python and boa wise-ish. But yeah, over the last handful of years, my temperature range has shrunk. So my hot spots got lower and lower, and my ambient got higher and higher.
Okay.
And now I'm at the point where I'm just ambient. The room is a giant cage.
Sure.
And then I have a few things, right? Like Suriname red tails that are on floor level. You know, I've got a gravid female Suriname right now that's in a vision cage, so she's got a basking light just because she's on the floor.
Okay. Sure.
But for the most part, yeah, everything is, I've narrowed it down. The more I move towards just ambient, the more success I had. And then even all my quarantine rooms were just ambient. And I would have emeralds and green trees in those rooms that wouldn't get misted at all. And they would shed perfectly every time and be highly iridescent. And then I would have all my stuff in my breeder rooms that had heat panels and misting system built in and everything. And then I get the odd bad sheds happening and stuff. And I just it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I finally have and I've also lost a house and my collection to a fire. So each heating device is another fire hazard as well, right?
Yeah.
And now, yeah, will be the first season where I'm fully ambient. So now I'm doing everything pretty well the same, and I do stuff right. Like my olive pythons, I'll keep higher in the room, and then Dumeril's boas and whatever rainbow boas, false water cobras, those are all on the low level, towards the floor, right? Because it's a degree or two different. So I just do it like that.
Okay.
And, yeah, I'll keep males lower, females above, stuff like that. You can find sweet spots in the room. Like maybe there's I have a doorway on one end of my basement where my snakes are that leads to the outside.
Okay.
So that wall and where the door is can get a little bit cooler at night. And I have Papuan, Savus, and white lips around that stairwell. So they can get a little cooler at night, whereas all my emeralds and red tail boas and stuff like that are further into the room, away from that exterior.
Sure.
But that's about the only difference. Everything else is pretty well the same, other than how moist I keep substrates and stuff, right? Like white lip pythons, ring pythons, rainbow boas, they like it quite damp,
Sure.
But no, otherwise I'm doing them the same. And then the room now, I have it set so the daytime high would get up to 85.
Okay.
And that's where it peaks. More often than not, it's 84 point something. Or closer to the floor, 83 point something. And then at night, it drops to 80.
Okay.
And in November, December, January, I'll have the daytime high the same, up to 85 at max. But at night, for those 3 months, it'll drop to 70.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how I'm doing pretty much all of it. And like I said, minor things, right? If this chair is going to fall apart here. If something needs to be higher up or away from a certain wall, that's the only real difference.
Sure.
And then I might offer some gravid females additional basking because they all wired in lights and stuff. So I just need, but I prefer not to.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Is I have a friend here in the States he's in Arizona who he doesn't, obviously Arizona, he's near Phoenix. That's one of the hottest parts of the entire country.
In there.
Yeah, but he doesn't even provide basking for his gravid females.
Yeah.
So ambient will be in the upper 80s during the day sometimes. So yeah, that was gonna be my question. When do you turn those basking spots on for your females? Is it post ovulation or once you see significant follicle development? What's your barometer there?
For me, I notice, post ovulation shed is when they move over from the cold side. Leading up to ovulation, my females will usually hang out like around the water sometimes or in the water.
Okay.
Even through ovulation, a lot of I noticed the white lips and the rings ovulated in the water. And then after that, usually after the shed, sometimes in shed, but after that post-ovulation shed, then they move and they start basking.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's when I would do it if I feel the need.
Sure.
But I mean, the only things I'm really going to consider it with is like I said, those red-tailed boas. I'll watch them, right? If I notice that they're constantly in a tight coil and trying to conserve heat and stuff, maybe I'll give it to them. But to be honest, I don't know that I'm going to offer much basking unless they're, again, that red tail, right? It's a stack of vision cages and she's just on like a 2-inch pedestal against the floor. So they're all, I'll give her that, but she might be the only one. Everything else is further off the floor, right?
Yeah.
I have like steel racks, with like a freedom breeder rack, just one level, across the floor, and then big PVC cages on top of that. So everything's, quite far off of the floor. And the floor, if you temp gun the floor too, the floor is 80, 82. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll watch them, I think, and decide if I need to give anything.
Sure.
It'll be an experiment, but I don't think so. I really don't think, because when you watch, even when these guys are finding this stuff in the wild and you see them temp gunning, I say every time it's 80 to at maximum 85, more 80 to 83. So I don't think that they need it, to be honest.
Fair enough. Well, it'll be really cool to see what your results are with that. I think that'll, especially with obscure python species that a lot of people have trouble even getting eggs in the first place, nonetheless experimenting with how to do it most effectively.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. The last few years, especially with all those, last year, seeing all the white lips and rings, there's 3 pairs of white lips and the pair of rings all kind of fall in on the same week. They start all doing the exact same things. That kind of gave me a clear indication of where I'm going with it.
Sure.
And what I think I need to do. So
yeah. Hell yeah. So with that, that decrease in your nighttime lows, do you have any other cycling methods you do? Are you doing light cycling, food cycling, humidity during those periods as well?
Yeah. So previously, obviously there was lights in my cages, so I would adjust those. And my room lights, whereas now it'll just be my room lights. The only cages right now that are running lights are the arboreals, just because they have LEDs in them.
Sure.
I basically will do, in the wintertime, the room lights will be on for 8 hours. Otherwise, they're on for like 12 hours.
Okay.
And it's just because it's the working room lights, right?
Sure.
So I cut those back. Usually like October, November is when I start cutting everything back. And then I work with the actual season, right? So as it starts getting cold and dark out here, I just shut the room heat off at night. And then it gets down to what it gets down to.
Sure.
The lowest I can ever really get it is 70. The lowest I've ever gone is 67.
Okay.
Just won't go below that. It takes too long to cool down.
Yeah.
And that's like the Savus and stuff against that exterior wall.
Okay.
And so October, November, I'll just start cutting the lights back. Right now I'm feeding quite heavily, approaching winter. I'm feeding just very frequently, a lot of food. And then as I start to get copulations and stuff, when I'm cooling, like I'll feed, it's kind of weird. Like I'll feed less, but as I start to see a lot of copulation happen, if I see females will start building follicles, then I'll start smashing them with bigger meals. And then that's often when you see, like, you'll feed a huge meal after a lot of copulations and you start to see them blow up with follicles. you'll smash them with a couple big meals, and then they'll often go into an ovulation.
Okay. And like roughly what time are you typically seeing that within that window? Is that later on, like closer to January, or even getting some earlier ones? And
God, man, that's another thing I've been figuring. It's been all over the place.
yeah.
So like my Amazon tree boas, I've bred them at every time of year.
Okay.
I have females that go in winter and females that go in summer. And I've noticed the more I go towards ambient, the more it's started to scatter a little bit too. Which is strange. Like I have a green tree python that she started breeding in September 2 years ago, and then right now before I left on like Thursday, she was blowing up huge and wouldn't eat, like potentially going into an ovulation, or maybe she ovulated over. I was out of town for 4 days, right?
Sure.
And then now today I tried to feed her yet again, and she's same thing, hiding her head, huffing and puffing, won't bite me. But swell has spread out again. So she could have ovulated,
Interesting.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Like my savus and stuff lay in spring. My olive pythons lay, like my savus lay in May, sorry.
Okay.
My olive pythons every year lay in March. This Papuan lay in May. So I guess a lot of it is like late winter, early spring.
Sure.
But then my boas and stuff usually have babies in summertime.
Sure.
So it's scattered, but I've noticed it's changed as I've changed my routine. And then I'll have some females of the same species go at opposite ends of the year from other ones. So I can't even give a distinct answer. Back in the day, I would have told you distinct, but the more I go on and figure them out, the less the more of a question it seems to be.
Yeah, that's cool. And I feel like that does line up with some other people I know who do a lot of ambient, is that kind of things just kind of go on their own schedule as opposed to like more regimented with supplemental heat.
Yeah, you're breeding them year round. And that's another thing I'm doing with the ambient too, is just pairing stuff. I have my strong season, but I'll watch. If I see a female looking a little bit tight and stiff, like she might be building follicles, like I'll pair them. And they'll copulate all they want. And if it doesn't go, it doesn't go. Then they'll go in their typical season, right?
Yeah.
But that's one thing I've learned too, is just kind of pair year round.
Okay.
And they'll go when they go.
Yeah. Alex, do you have anything? I know I've been kind of dominating the conversation.
Yeah.
For a bit.
I mean, I won't lie. I'm just trying to take in as much knowledge as possible in this case, because at my work, got womas that they've never been able to breed them there. And this was the first, since I've started working here, I followed pairing a little bit later in the season than I would have wanted, after hearing what you've just said and speaking with a couple other people who breed some of the Australian stuff. But I've been starting to hammer them with small meals about every 10 to 14 days right now. And the plan will be to pair them once I take them off heat. But honestly, one of the things that I just wanted to highlight it that I'm taking mental notes of is the amount of times you say you watch your animals. I just feel like seeing your successes, hearing you talk about your work with, just obviously your start with the Papuans, but then now you're mentioning, you just noticed all your white lips and your Bothrochilus were linked. It's just something where it's kind of, at least in my time listening to other keepers, is that the people who are really dialed in and having success are the people that pay attention to their animals frequently. It sounds, this is your shop, you're there all the time, you live there. And so I do wonder to some extent, Stephen, you were saying people have one-off breeding successes, but if it really comes down to the day-to-day of knowing what your animals are doing, and man, your one Papuan, she's not trying to kill me. That probably means something. You're taking notes. I wish I could share something insightful as far as my experience breeding pythons, but I just don't have that much experience with oddball pythons as far as breeding goes. only pythons I've ever personally bred through my work experience is just ball pythons, which anybody can do that. So
it all relates.
Yeah, it's cool, like they're processing it. And honestly, I think honestly, it just has to be a case of people watching their animals. That's something that I've tried to take a lot of notes on with my my lizards, for instance.
Yeah.
The water dragons, seeing the way they arch themselves when they're gravid. And I've noticed, especially like in the case, again, behavioral stuff. Female one eagerly ran to the food bowl. Normally, she'd eat every other day, and this time she's beating a male. Something's going on, and the next thing you know, you do that take notes on that for 2-3 years, and suddenly you realize she does this action on day X, and eggs are laid on day Y. I'm comparing lizards to snakes here, but that's what I'm hearing you say is, I paired them on this day, and you're taking notes. And I'm hoping, the listeners, and I said myself, this is what I'm processing, is that it's really is a case of watching your animals, because like, what you just said too, Stephen, people who keep on ambient, sometimes the snakes just cycle randomly. And the other thing that sort of made me think about this is you're talking about a lot of Indonesian stuff that comes in wild caught. So their cycle that they come in, even for the first few years, might be the cycle that they were used to living in the jungle. And we're trying to pick up on that. And then maybe that cycle changes over time with them being in captivity. Or like you were saying, Cody, you're switching them over to ambient. So maybe how they used to breed with heat lamps for you is changing, and you're noticing that. That's what you're saying. And I don't know, maybe my point, that doesn't sound really well put together, but that's just how I'm processing all this information you shared. And it's definitely somewhere I'm going to have to re-listen to all that, because it's cool. Like it's complicated, but it's cool. And again, like clearly you're showing it's working. I mean, how many people are just saying, yeah, Sabu's, Bred, Rings did it. Like you're clearly putting all these points together, and it's overlapping and fitting in your snake room in this case. But then with the species you're choosing to work with, which, as we started the episode, are not common, not necessarily easy, but it's working. So, I mean,
yeah, that's it. I find so many people, and I used to do this too. I used to look for a recipe. I would be like, man, why can't this guy just say, like, drop this many degrees for these days and then do this? But I feel like people get so caught up in that, like, they'll hear a guy say, this month I dropped to this and then this and this. And then people focus so much on that they miss what the animal's telling them, And it's so loose. Like there's 101 ways to do it right.
Yeah.
So that's tough.
And like you're saying, just where you're at, again, I'm going to bring up water dragons as an example. Whenever I've hatched them and whenever I have observed copulations or I just see breeding activity, I'm about a month behind some of my friends on the East Coast. For whatever reason, they will send me photos of their female swelling in February. I never get that till around March here in the Midwest. I don't know if it's a pressure thing. I don't know if it's my location thing. It's just how I've had it. And then when I've sent them lizards that I've produced, or even a male of mine that is a proven breeder, he picked up on their seasonal change right away. And I got a photo of him copulating with a female in January, which he never did living with me for 6 years. So it's like you ought to wonder too if it's a location thing. You're all the way up there in Canada. Like you said, you get those 3 months of just cold, snow, different pressure systems coming through. Whereas someone saying California, maybe they've got, I don't know, ring pythons or white lips. They might be completely opposite of you. I don't know. Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, this is in the chat. Okay, so in that case, you know what I mean? Like you were saying, it's not a recipe, but to some extent, you're also writing your own recipe for your location, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Different barometric pressures everywhere. And
yeah,
just what's going through my head right now. This is awesome. Like,
it is really awesome to see. Lisa did drop a couple pointed questions in the comments. The first one I think is the most important one yet, but why no scrub pythons?
Total BS. We're not allowed them here. Yeah, closest I can have is Timor's.
Really? Is that all of Canada, or is it just in Alberta?
It's Alberta, yeah.
Is it like is it specifically Amethystina? You can't keep like Nada or Clastolepis at all?
Yeah, we can't have any of them here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which for a while we could. It was during the Morelia Somalia change.
Oh.
There was like a year or two or something where we could. And then a few people out here got them, and then I knew what was going to happen. And yeah, they changed it, and then we couldn't have them again.
Wow.
Otherwise, I would be like you with a room full of scrubs as well.
Yeah. Hell yeah. But Lisa, on a more serious note, ask about your yearly food cycle for both your females and your males. We touched on it very briefly about just during the cool down period, but overall for the whole year, what does that look like for your adult pythons?
I'm not a schedule guy.
Okay.
My males, I feed quite sparingly. Everything I feed quite sparingly. I feel like that's part of it too, heavy food cycling. So I keep my animals very lean. And then coming into breeding season, I ramp it up, right? So after my females lay and stuff, I'll hit them very heavy with food, whenever that may be, right? Like most of the pythons, it's approaching spring, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll lay, and then I'll feed them some good meals just to get them past that hump.
Okay.
But other than that, after those couple heavy meals, I'm casual about it. I'm not in a huge hurry to bulk them back up. So most of those pythons, really, I'm feeding them like every 3 weeks.
Okay.
For after they lay, like spring, summer, I'm feeding them like every 3 weeks, probably, depending what it is, right?
Sure.
And sometimes I'll feed them like a decent meal. Sometimes I'll feed them a big meal. It's just all over. And then coming into fall, I'm feeding them quite heavy to put the weight on. And then as soon as I start pairing in winter, I slow down again, right? Because I'm doing my nighttime dropping and everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of out of the box feeding, really. So approaching pairings, I ramp up the feeding in fall. Once they start copulating a lot, I don't disturb them so much. But then once I see the females start to stiffen up and start to build follicles, then I start smashing them with food again. I start feeding them heavy, right? So spring and summer is very light, every 3 weeks to feed something. And then, yeah, like in the winter, I'll start feeding them again after that fall stint.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll start feeding them real heavy again until they usually go off food. If they're gravid, right? I'll just keep feeding them heavy until they stop eating.
Yeah.
And then if they don't take, then, spring, they just slow down again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not very routine. Again, I'm just watching the animals, right?
Yeah.
Fall, I feed heavy. And then after they start copulating very heavily and start building follicles, then I feed heavy again.
Mm-hmm.
But break in between, right? But otherwise on the off season, they're like every 3 weeks, sometimes every 2 weeks, I'll give them a meal.
Okay.
It's whatever, right?
Okay.
It's hard to follow my.
No, sure. I mean, but like I think it says a lot that you're just kind of feeding based off of your observation of the animal and, using that for just whatever schedule you'd want to be on.
Yeah. And my males for the most part are like every 3 weeks. And then sometimes I'll feed them every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like across the board.
Cool. Do you try to repeat your females back to back routinely? Do you often try to give them a year off? What's your strategy with that?
No, I try and have, depending what it is, like I do my best to have like 3 pairs of things. And then I'll do a different female every year.
Okay.
So whereas with the Papuans, I tried to do back to back because I just didn't have another female to try.
Yeah, sure.
And that female literally on the same week did the same thing the next year. So I was like,
yeah, fuck it.
But yeah, if I have other pairs, then if I have 3 pairs, I'll give a female 2 years off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Whereas like say my olives, man, they don't want, like my olives will go damn near to the point where they lay slugs if you don't breed them. They don't. I give them years off, but they'll go all the way. They'll build huge follicles and go off food, and like they get this dark kind of ugly look to them when they're wanting to breed.
Okay.
And yeah, they want to go every year, even if I don't let them.
Must be nice.
Yeah. I wish everyone was like that though. But
yeah, for sure. Alex, I'm going to throw it over to you for the next one.
Absolutely. So like you mentioned the olives just now, but one thing that I'm very curious on, you highlighted them earlier, your ring pythons. Yeah. I know you produced them this year. They're not very common. I've only worked with them a handful of time at various jobs or like when I've been at friends who've got them, watching their collection. I'm very curious. Earlier you touched on saying like them and the white lips, and I know they used to be in the same genus. Split the white lips. So they were soaking in their water when they're building follicles. Like, would you just be willing to sort of break down, like, how long have you had the rings? Have you been trying to dial them in for a while? Like, what do you think made them click this year for you? Because again, just people seem to work with them.
I'm just pulling up my Instagram. That's where I kind of have got it documented. But no, the rings actually, when I was in Toronto, I was talking to some people that worked at the facility where they came from, and I guess they were trying to breed them, but they just didn't get them to go. So I'm not sure what the difference was or how they were, if they were keeping warmer or trying a different time of year. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
But I got them. I only got those rings, like, I only had them for like maybe 6 months before I bred them. I got them, quarantined them, and then bred them.
Oh, wow.
So I had, we got rings, white lips, rings. Yeah, so those rings were relatively new to me. Female bismuth, blah, blah. Okay. So my rings started breeding April 1st.
They weren't fooling you.
What's that?
They weren't fooling you.
No, yeah, it was not. There was no fibbing there. So April 1st, right? Those rings was first copulation. April 2nd, northern white lip copulations.
Wow.
So they were right there, right? And I had 2 pairs of northern white lips doing the same. My southerns, I didn't know. Because they were in their hides, and they're so psycho, like you can't touch that cage, right? If they see you, one will start striking at you, and then the other one will strike that one, and then they'll wrap each other. So you have to just assume they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
With the southerns, there was 2 hide boxes, one on each side, and I would just slide the glass and like lift to feel the weight of the hide box, and they would move back and forth, but they would always be in the same hide box. So I knew something good was happening. I'd never seen them the whole time, but my northerns I did. And they were literally like the day after the rings, right? So those copulations, that was April 1st, the rings started, right? And then April 5th, the female was already blowing up and in the water with the male. They had moved into the water and were still copulating. And then the northerns were doing the exact same thing. I don't think they were in the water as much as the rings. The rings go in the water a lot. But the white lips would be like around the water bowl and stuff like that. And then by April 8th, the female ring was just growing more. And I had been pairing these things since fall too.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just pairing them on and off because I was trying to figure out, right, when was their time. Because there's no harm in pairing whenever, unless it's Apodora. Everything else, man, you can pair it. I just pair it all year. And you'll see the massive difference when they kick in. Like,
sure.
And then you learn the season, right? And then for that stuff, I had like Oh yeah, by May she was due to lay already. Like it happened very fast.
Okay.
Same thing, yeah. The southern white lip, May 14th, the southern white lip was blowing up in the nest box and was off food by May 17th.
Okay.
So April, May was when those white lips and rings all just, they started locking, and then they started swelling and staying in the water or as far from the warm side as possible, because some of them still had mild basking at 86 degrees, right?
Okay.
And we got here, when we got, yeah, like, I mean, the one white lip laid in July. I don't have all my records are downstairs, so I'm just kind of going off my Instagram posts here. Oh yeah, the ring laid in June.
Okay.
Right, so they were all within that. Started playing stories. Yeah, they were all within that range, right? But April, May, June was when they went.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm still figuring them out. Like, this is my first year having success with, to some degree, with all of those species. The rings I never tried to breed before, and the white lips I was trying too early before. I was actually separating them way too early.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I noticed, actually, what showed me that with the southerns is I had never witnessed any copulations. And then I had got an ultrasound machine, and Buddy brought it over and was just showing me how to use it. And we pulled out that southern in June, and I think she had like 44 millimeter follicles or something. They were like eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was retarded. They're huge.
Jeez.
I think it was 44 millimeter. I don't know, I'm not a millimeter guy, but I think that's what it was. And they were literally like eggs. But at that point, I had long stopped pairing.
Yeah.
So I knew this year going into it, you know, March, April was when I wanted to have them together. And that's when everything took off. Same with, I just applied that to the northerns too, right? Usually I paired through winter, and come spring, I was like, shit, they didn't go.
Yeah.
So this year I actually did it in spring, and it was way better. My northerns too did the same, copulating, and then they started swelling in the water, huge swells, and then after the huge swell, they shrunk down, and then the swell spread out, and then they went into shed, longer than average shed, and then they wouldn't eat and started basking, right? Everything was the same, on point. But the northerns both reabsorbed.
Okay.
They didn't end up laying, just the southern laid and the rings.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said you've got the rings and all your white lips on that outer wall. Are they like all in the same stack too?
So now I've refined it, but before, like when I was breeding them this last season, and let me know if you gotta reel me in. I'm kind of all over the place sometimes. But
You're good.
I had one pair of northerns, and the rings were on top of each other in a steel rack. It's like a freedom breeder rack, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were by that stairwell, by the door, so they could get cooler. Another pair of northerns were dead center in the middle of the room. They weren't on any exterior wall. And then my southerns were deep into the room. They actually back onto the wall where my boiler is. So they couldn't get all that cool. And my southerns also had the hottest basking spot. They were in a vision cage with a light. So they could hit 90 degrees in the basking.
Yeah.
But it's one of the large vision cages that's like, I think they're like 5 feet by 3 feet front to back or something. And she slugged out. Now, whether it was because she didn't get cool enough, or whether it was because it was her first time ever laying, who knows?
Yeah.
But I've eliminated the basking spot.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're still there just because that's where the vision cages fit. But now all of my northerns and stuff are in that rack against, and my male Southerns, they're all in those steel racks against the stairwell. And yeah, so they're all going to get the same cooling this year. Those ones easily get down to 70 at night, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Dude, that's just freaking awesome. Like I said, for me, it's the consistency thing. Seeing that, you know, and even then, like you're constantly tweaking things, you're adjusting it, you're getting results. Yeah, and even like not getting eggs, I think is still like, it's something like you can ask yourself what didn't happen, you know, and like clearly you're doing that. And again, it's a cool mindset, I guess, to follow and learn from. Pythons aside, though, you do Indicus complex monitors.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, like Indicus complex are some of my favorite monitors. I mean, like Blue Tails would probably be up there with one of my favorite monitors. And I know like you've got the Molinas behind you. You've bred Indicus. Do you have Yuanawai, right?
I do, yeah. Well, they ended up being 2 males, but I'm trying to work on a female right now. A guy's got.
So,
Cool.
As far as from what it sounds like with the way you're transitioning your snakes, as far what ambient, you're pairing throughout the year, but you're starting to get your seasons dialed in with them. Like, how do you, I guess, balance them with trying to monitor the cycles of your monitors, right? I just feel like that's a little bit less forgiving, where if you put a male in with a female and she's not ready, you know, the snakes, other than maybe some of your cannibalistic species, they'll just ignore each other. Whereas with monitors, if that female's really not wanting to go, she kind of will mess that male up. How do you just be like, yeah, I'm going to pair these snakes. Oh, and I should probably check my monitors, which have to be doing, you know, something perfect. And then you're still breeding. I mean, that's what baffles me, man.
It's crazy how much observation matters, right? Like you can look at them all day, but if you don't look at them 10 times a day, it makes a difference. Like when I had a partner, I had some stuff where I was just cranking them out. Like I had way too many. I had hundreds of them, and I had to stop breeding them. And I noticed when it became just me, even though I'm still here every day and I'm still watching, if I'm not watching 10 times a day per animal, you would miss things. So it's crazy how important, like, checking once a day just sometimes doesn't do it to the same extreme.
Sure.
So yeah, the way to manage it is just spend your day checking, like, and really paying attention to like what did it do yesterday. You know, has it spent more time basking? What position is it hanging its belly in? What is its appetite like? You know, like, so that's the hardest thing for me now with the Indicus complex, like specifically Dorianus, the blue tails. I could be pumping them out, but I just shit the bed. Like my Dorianus it's a 21-foot room. At the top, it's 21 feet. So what it is it was a stairwell. There was a staircase, a big concrete staircase that went from the main level of my building to the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And before I got the building, they boarded that over, closed it off. So when you go downstairs, there's this entrance, and then you look to the right, and it's like a little hallway, and then a big set of stairs that just goes to the roof and stops. So the entrance to that hallway, I closed off, and it's literally just a 4-foot by 2-foot plexi door. So that's the only way I can see it, the blue tails, right? They're very isolated, and they're so shy and high strung. Got a quince going for a bath somewhere there. And my problem with them is I get eggs from them all the time, but I miss them and they get eaten. And then I see them shit out on the ground. But I can't separate them because they're so high strung. I mean, the male's like 6 feet, man. Like, and I can't. It's too hard to separate them. And it's such a huge enclosure that they do so well. I don't want to reintroduce, you know? Yeah. So I'm trying to just keep missing the eggs. I got to lock it in and focus on them. but yeah, that's the hard part is like, you got to be diligent with just checking again and again every day. So sometimes I have to refine things. Like I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to start cranking out bearded dragons because I'm sick of buying them from people. But then I realized it took me away and I started missing monitor clutches or, you know, so that is the tricky part. Like, it's just, you got to figure out how to manage it. And I have a helper that helps me, not with my collection, but with the store.
Okay.
And that helps, right? Because he does all the waters and cages and stuff in the store every day. Or he'll be, helping customers, and then I can run downstairs and monitor things or check nest boxes and do this or that. But yeah, it is a juggling act. The snakes, there's not as much monitoring, like there is, but you can check it once a day and check the next day and you can see, right? Whereas a monitor, it's a little bit different.
Sure.
If you have a pair together and one's nesting and it comes out, like I had it here actually with the Molinas. I was so busy. I can't remember. I think it was an expo. Yeah, I had an expo. So I was packing animals, for a day and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Had all this shit going on, and I missed that she was due to lay. It just lapsed my mind what day she was due to lay. And customers were in, and they're like, "Oh my God, your big monitors are fighting." And I was like, "Oh, you idiots!" Like, and I broke them up, and I had thought about. I was like, "Is she due to lay?" I don't think so right now. Like, and I stuffed her back in the nest box, like to get them apart. And then not even thinking, right, that she just laid and he went in there to try and eat the eggs and she attacked them. That's what happened. But I was so busy packing animals and running the business, I didn't think about it. I stuffed her back in the nest box. And then like 15 minutes later, a kid's like, "Hey, I think your lizard's eating an egg." And I'm like, "What?" And I go over and she's on the ground with an egg in her mouth. And then I looked at her and like she dropped the egg. And then I opened the door and instead of grabbing the egg, because it's 4 feet front to back, so you can't reach, right?
Mm-hmm.
I went to shoot her out, and then she grabbed the egg and looked at me and then popped it. It's like, fuck, and she lays 7 eggs every time now. Mm. So then I went in the nest box, and there was 3 eggs half buried in there. So she obviously, when I stuffed her back in the nest box, she was stressed and ate the rest of those eggs. Or maybe he ate a couple and then she attacked it. Who knows, right? But that happens. You stretch yourself too thin or you can't monitor. The monitors, you really got to monitor. Otherwise, you miss stuff, right? I think that's why people don't breed them. Because they're so easy to breed. Like, they're not hard to breed. But you have to be, like, on point with everything. And if you miss it, you miss a clutch of eggs. So yeah, it's tough. You just gotta find the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So then with, you said you failed out with getting a pair you want to Y. So you've got eggs from the Dorianis, and then are the only 2 indica species you've currently bred are just Molinas and then the mangroves?
Yeah. Peach throats, I was getting eggs and stuff. And then my one female who I was getting eggs from, I had bad luck with them. I had an egg-laying female, and then I got a male, raised them to size. And at the time, this was before I moved, this is when I had a double-car garage that was kind of turned into a monitor room. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't gone through a winter yet in that. And so my peach throats, I put him in there the first week. Boom, they're locked up. Everything was looking good. And then this was before I was really into breeding monitors. I had just hatched my first clutch of Ackies. The cage was on my garage floor, but I had built a heating grid out of PVC that I ran heat cable through. And then I put the substrate on top of that, right? But I had in there, the nest box was a 40-gallon aquarium painted black. And it was kind of jammed against the wall. And the wall of that cage was against the garage door. And we had a freeze over where it was like -40. And so that wall of that cage got cold, right? Just the wall, the air in the cage was in the mid 80s, but that wall was cold. And my male was wedged between the wall and the glass tank. And I wasn't going to disrupt him. I was like, oh, sorry, dude. Like, and it was a lesson learned. And then I went looking for him like 4 days later. I was like, man, the male's not really been out. And he was still there. And he was in there and he had cooled down a lot, being pressed against there. And his nails were against the aquarium. So there was no real grip. And he wasn't that powerful because he was cool. He was like 70 degrees. Not like freezing, but not monitor temp.
Yeah.
And he was literally so freshly gone when I found him. He was still soft. You know what I mean? When you're looking at it, you're like, are you still alive? Like, can I warm you up? And so I lost him, and then she laid, but she laid on an area of a heated area that was like 95 degrees. And the eggs were like really hot, you know, but they looked like perfect eggs.
Yeah.
And I didn't end up hatching them. So then after I moved here, this female's pretty old. Like, she has since kind of stopped laying. She hasn't laid. My new male I raised up by the time he was mature and I put them together, she's kind of stopped laying. So I have another pair of Joviensis that I'm raising up. So hopefully they'll be better.
Okay.
And then I have Obor. I had 2 females laying 5 eggs every 3 months. One was laying 5 eggs every 2 months. The other one lays every 3 months.
Wow.
Just like clockwork. Boom, 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 boom. And some eggs that look partho, but then 2-3 months in, the eggs go bad. But I cannot get my hands on a male.
Yeah.
So yeah, so far it's just been the Indicus. I did like over 50 Indicus babies and then close to 50 Molinas babies now. But
wow. Yeah, man, those Obor, they're some of my favorite monitors. I've been lucky enough to work with both phenotypes of them, and just they're so damn cool.
Dude, they're a mini black dragon. Some of them, like
yeah.
If you ever are aware of any males of somebody that would send to Canada, let me know.
Yeah.
Did you get that pair from Sim Containers that he was selling a while ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hounding him to export those for me, and I looked into it, and he's like, well, I probably could. And then there was a big expo. He went there and then didn't talk to me again. And I was like, and then I seen you guys got some more, and I was like, oh, I bet you that's where they went. Like,
yeah. Well, they may be still able to end up with you. I don't know, but I'd hope so. That would be awesome. But yeah, they're such cool animals. They really are. I love those Obor so much. They're so neat.
Underrated little monitor, like.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one that most people I don't think even are aware that they exist. And even if they do, they haven't. I mean, I didn't know that they were as small as they are. They look so big in pictures.
Yeah.
They really do.
Did you happen to see that mail that Chris Applin posted?
How recently?
It was like a week or two ago, but it was just in a comment section.
Oh, okay.
Male Molinas size, man.
Wow.
Crazy. And it was like the solid black type. Or like with the red face. But
yeah.
Like they're extra pretty ones.
Wow.
I was like, holy shit, I had no.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because my females are the same size as my Molinas females, but I've never seen a male.
Yeah.
Like there's only 2 in Canada that I know of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, after we're done with the live show, let's talk for a minute, because I got some ideas to run by you on that might benefit you.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have no promises, but be worth a shot. Yeah. Cool. So what's your strategy with your breeding of the monitors? I mean, you obviously you're very successful with them. So is it a lot of heavy feeding, or what's?
I'm pretty lean with them too.
Okay.
So I found when I was feeding really heavy, I was God, my Indicus and Obor were laying every 2 months, just boom, 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 boom for a full year. Like,
No shit.
Yeah, my one Obor female was like, it was too much. Like I had to cut the food back, way back, because she was laying so many eggs. But with them, my big thing is like, what? I mean, again, right? You just tweak it to your setup. But for me, I don't do any screen or anything. Like solid boxes is what works well for me, which seems to just keep pumping. I go solid boxes where the ambient, again, the ambient is high, right?
Yeah.
And my building is quite warm in general and humid. So you can see, right? Solid box. I do them out of either PVC or plywood. They're all elevated off the ground.
Okay.
Like this one is on wheels. And sorry, I got street folk like crazy in here and they're in my doorway. I do like same Mike Stefani and Sim Container, same thing they do with the water. It's a cement mixing tub for water, right? I've got a shower drain in there that I can open up. And I just keep like, well, whatever, 8 inches of peat moss and coconut husk and sand or whatever in the bottom. I keep your typical monitor nest box, right? Like those Home Depot tubs.
Mm-hmm.
Hole in the top. I have 2 tubs stacked inside of each other. And there's a heat pad on the side in between the 2 tubs.
Okay.
So the monitors can't get to the pad and mess it up. And then I just run it. I use a low wattage one. It's not on a thermostat or a dimmer. And it's about 1 inch off of the floor, right? And they always lay their eggs right there in that inch under the pad at 85 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And then the box is like probably 60. I just eyeball everything. It's like probably 60% sand, and the rest is peat moss. And I keep that really moist. And then I feed mainly, all the heat is up top. Otherwise there's no heat in the rest of the cage.
Okay.
So the floor can get to like 80. The floor is like 80 degrees. And then as you go up, it gets hotter, right?
Yeah.
They're basking spots. I keep it like, for the most part, they're around like 125. Everything shuts off at night. The monitors, they can get these ones don't get a crazy night drop where they are. Most of the other ones get a pretty good night drop in the middle of winter. I mean, like whatever, mid 70s at night.
Yeah.
And then I feed a lot of chicks.
Okay.
I would say realistically every 2 weeks they get rodents.
Okay.
Otherwise I feed lots of chicks. And I'll feed like every 2-3 days. And then I'll either feed them a bunch of chicks or hard-boiled chicken eggs. I feed them quail eggs too, because like people often donate stuff to me, right? Like I know lots of people that like work with like street people or whatever, you know what I mean? And then they get all these cases of food that's like it's going to expire soon. So, you know, people will give me that kind of stuff. And so if I get quail eggs, I'll throw them a pile of quail eggs. Even like you could see there's like a green tray on top of the nest box. I'll fill that with superworms and just let them have fun eating like 200 superworms. But for the most part, it's chicks. They eat a lot of chicks. And then, I feed them just every 2-3 days, right? Each one will get, I have to feed them a lot sometimes because they'll fight otherwise. So you're like pounding food to the male so the female can eat.
Sure.
But I'll do that too, like the food cycling. So about 40 days before she's due to lay again, I'll just smash the female with food. Yeah. And then a month before she's due to lay, they'll start copulating like crazy. And then she lays. All my indicus stuff now, for the most part, is every 3 months they lay.
Okay.
And that's year round. They don't have a season. It's just every 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just, I assume, just keep that condition solid year round. You don't fluctuate really temperatures or feeding or anything.
Nah, the building will change. It's, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I don't change anything.
Okay.
Even with the monitors, I don't cut their lights earlier or later. I keep it the same.
Okay.
And yeah, so say this female will lay eggs, right? You can kind of see like a track, kind of.
Yeah.
I have a divider that slides in.
Okay.
So within like a week or two of her getting ready to lay, I slide the divider in. And then when she lays, for a good week or two after she lays, I'll just feed her and let her recoup.
Mhm.
But again, I'm pretty casual. Like, I'm in no hurry to smash the food to her until that last month, right? So for a couple of weeks, I'll let her just slowly recoup, and then I'll let them at each other again. And then for, a month and a half, they just hang out. But then that last month before she's due to lay, they're copulating every day.
Wow.
Either in the water dish or the nest box. And then that's when I really start hitting the food again.
Sure.
Right? So
Okay.
Same as the snakes. As soon as copulating is really going heavy, then I smash the female. And it's the same routine. It just works good with everything, I find.
Yeah. I mean, hey, makes it easier for you because you're kind of just able to approach everything in a pretty similar fashion, kind of within reason.
Yeah, it works across the board. Like, they're just like a snake, really, I find.
More apex predator.
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying, you did geckos, basilisks, and whatnot. Definitely a lot different.
Oh, yeah. And even like the dwarf monitors, I just always give them tons of crickets, and then they just every month do their thing.
Very cool.
So, and then what's that?
No, keep going.
Well, I was gonna say, and then the tree monitors seem to fall with the indicus complex.
Okay.
It seems to be, for me anyway, it seems to be a 3-month cycle.
Okay.
What species of trees are you working with?
Really just the greens. I have one blue. And then I bought through somebody another pair of blues, but that was a year and a half ago and I haven't got them yet. So I'm just trying to get that sorted. But it's like just import stuff, right? Like they got screwed around and stuff didn't come. So I'll probably end up having to try and source out other blues. And I would like yellows too.
I'm curious, for your monitors, you mentioned sim earlier. What do you do for incubation? Do you use suspended? Do you have your own monitor mix?
For whatever reason, I haven't had good luck with suspended. I tried and I failed every time. So I do, like the 6-inch circular clear.
Oh yeah.
Containers
like a deli cup, right?
Yeah, they're pre-punched, the big ones. I use those for lizards, and then I tape up all the holes. I tape up all the holes, and then I poke a pin through one of the holes. You know what I mean? So the hole's not fully open, but it can't pressurize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I just use perlite. I fill it like halfway up with perlite. And then I stick the eggs in there. I used to be a die-hard vermiculite guy because I used it for 15 years. But I don't like how wet vermiculite stays now for me. The perlite is nice and clean. It drains a little better. Yeah. And then for snake eggs, I do the same, but I just incubate them in shoebox tubs. Same thing, just like a little hole in it or lids that don't seal good. And then I go perlite. And I soak the perlite to where there's standing water in the bottom. So it's almost suspended. And then I put the egg crate or lighting diffuser on top of the perlite. And then it just, seems to work good across the board for every species for me.
And then for like your incubator, you were saying you keep your snake one at about 86? Like, you do that for the monitors? You go a bit cooler? Like, what type of incubator are you using? Like a
So my snakes are 87. I always did 88, but then I bumped it down a little bit. I'll probably end up bumping it down a little more. We'll see. I don't know. I always used wine coolers, but I got a really good deal. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cornell's World.
Yep.
Yeah. Big PVC incubator. He does PVC cages too.
That's a Greg West company, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
So I got a really good deal on his jumbo size one from somebody. And it's just a 4 foot by 4 foot, just full of shelves. Like I think it's 60 shoebox totes in there. And that's what I'm using for snakes now. There's a little bit of a learning curve because it's got all these fans in the top and sliding glass. You get way more airflow, right? But that's what I've been using for the snakes now. And the lizards, I'm still using all my old snake incubators, which are just wine fridges with the clear door on it. Mm-hmm. And then I put heat tape. Basically on the bottom half, there's heat tape down the back and on the floor. And they have those little like dual shelf in the very bottom. And I put a big fan on that. So it's this high above the heat tape on the floor. Mm-hmm. And the fan sucks down and blows at the heat tape. So in my mind, it's like blowing the heat up the sides, you know, instead of having a fan at the top blowing on the egg containers. And it seems to stay really steady, actually.
Cool.
Yeah. And then that's what I use. And there's just hooked up to a thermostat. And I do my lizards at 85. It's like, I don't know. One says 84.5 and then one says 85. So it's something like that.
I mean, that's like what they nest at in a sense, right?
Yeah, I temp gun them every time and they're like 85 where they lay them every time. So that's just what I do across the board for every lizard I hatch. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I said, just again, very thorough, breaking down every aspect of it, very helpful. At my current the snake facility that I'm overseeing, we do have a small, what I'm hoping is a parakeets, but they're going to be a few years out. So I've been taking notes, one from you tonight and just following your content. And then there's a guy who is in Illinois here in the States who's bred Molinas a few times. So again, very helpful, man. And like I said, we appreciate you sharing this. This is super insightful.
Oh, of course, man. Yeah, it's all, I mean, you try and figure it out.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to ask you about the stingrays. I know nothing about them, but it's they're super cool. What kind of, I mean, what prompted that for you, the stingrays?
I just like weird stuff, like that arowana thing. Like I didn't give a damn about fish. I had no interest until I figured out you keep monster fish. From the arowana, I went had alligator gars and red-tail catfish and all those big catfish. And then I seen it at a couple stores out here, stingrays. I'm like, shit, that's cool. And so I got my first one, and then within a month I had 8 of them. And then all my catfish just started to disappear because the razors are so addicting, you know. And they're super personable. They recognize you. They all come to the glass and beg for food. Like if you're trying to get a video of one that you're selling for somebody, they all come pile up at the glass on top of each other. And the same thing, there's all these oddball species, you know, like the Liasis genus. There's all these brown rays that people don't really put much emphasis on and that aren't imported much. So I thought that was cool. And then I started breeding them 6 years ago. And they're cool. They're, again, easy to breed if you give them what they need, which is tons of food, which then entails tons of water changes and enough space, right? Because a male will bite the female's disc until she swims up off the ground, and then he'll flip under her, and they'll be belly to belly. And he's got 2 claspers, right? It's like a reptile, 2 hemipenes, or like a shark has them too, right? And you'll see him maneuvering them, working them, and like trying to find her. And then he'll insert when they're belly to belly, and then they'll drop down. And so you need to have enough height that they can breed too.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then, they give live birth. Like the brown rays are like, 3.5 month gestation. The black rays are like 4 months. And it's live birth. They just have, I think my biggest litter was 13 pups. Sometimes I'll have 4. It just depends, right? But they're like snakes. It tends to go, and lizards, it tends to go up in size over the years. A female will start small, but the biggest thing with them is just water quality, a lot of oxygen in the water, and morally space. Like, you could keep one alive in a small tank, but the bio load too, the amount of waste that those things put off is insane. Like, you need a lot of water volume to not immediately contaminate it.
Sure.
Like, how big I'm guessing you're running sumps on them. Like, how big are your sumps compared to like the volume of your aquariums?
So I've downsized a lot. Like at one point I had 69 rays. And now I've just got, other than baby tanks, I just have 3 systems. I have a 350 gallon tank that has a 120 gallon sump on it, and a Fluval FX6 canister, just because I had it sitting there. And then my other 2 systems are 1,000 gallons. Each one is 9 foot by 6 foot. And they're like, one is like 40 inches tall, and then the other one is like 36 or 30 inches, 36 tall or something. But those ones are not on sumps. Those ones are on big, like these huge canisters that are like linked together. And it's basically like a pool filter, Yep. There's plastic media inside. And then they're connected to a drain. And so I flip a lever to backwash, and it reverses the flow of the media and stirs it up and pumps all the waste out to a drain, and drains the tank at the same time. And then you flip it over to rinse, and then it puts it back to the regular flow and stops stirring the media, and then rinses out all that dirty water until it's just clean tank water coming through. And you flip it back over to filter, and then it just pumps it back to the tank. And then those run up to big, like those blue rain barrel kind of deals.
Oh, yeah, like the 55 gallon drums.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then there's live pothos on the top, but there's bio balls. So it pumps water up to there, and then it trickles down through that back into the tanks. And they're just easier to maintain that way because I don't have to like run drain. Like it pumps the water out to a drain, 2,000 gallons per hour. So it's a little quicker, right?
That's the way to do it, though. I mean, like, just with any large tanks in general, it just seems like any way you can maximize, because, water changes in general is like a fish keeper's worst enemy. So you can speed it up, make it efficient. It's just going to keep your fish healthy, or in this case, your rays healthy. If you don't mind me, I know that, again, this is a reptile podcast, but you were saying brown rays, like, are you specifically what species? Like, are you Matoros, pearls?
So now I've cut it right back. Like I only have like 15 or 16 rays now. Okay. And I have a group of hybrids that I produced that are now producing. They're marble, which is like marble Matoro, Mantilla, and something else. The original male was a mix, a Mantilla mix of something. But they're marble Mantilla hybrids, basically. And now those hybrids are breeding. Cool. And then they're breeding to another hybrid I made that was a Hystrix bred to a Matoro. So now I'm making like Hystrix marble Mantillas. And then I have a group of albino pearls. And then I have a pair of Orbignii. Okay. And then yeah, more of the other same hybrids that I've just been mixing. Yeah, normally I hate hybrids, but with the stingrays, like, it's so crazy, man. Like, you breed them and you get this patterns that you wouldn't believe, patterns and colors.
Cool.
So that's yeah, I do it there. It's fun, you know.
Yeah, that's when I have the space, I would love to keep like just black diamonds or something someday, but definitely a long ways out from that.
Yeah, cool. And the black diamonds get huge.
Yeah, I know. I want big rays, but
Yeah,
maybe someday.
Dude, they're fun.
Yeah. Figure it out. But seriously, thank you for that, man. This has been an awesome episode, dude. Like, as the information, I mean, between the pythons, the monitors, I should have brought my notepad. So I'll
rewatch it. Yeah.
Or I'll probably try and shoot you a message or something as I get closer to trying to dial in some of the snakes at work. But seriously, this has been phenomenal, man. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, whenever, man.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up here, what are some of like your goals for the future, kind of either close or in the future? You know, what are you, where are you looking to the future as far as what you're doing with reptiles?
Initially, my goal was to have something not to the same extreme, but similar to Reptilandia. And I wanted to be breeding stuff in the exhibits. But after having a store for 5 years or whatever, my goal is actually now, my long-term goal, whether it'll happen or not, the dream would be to relocate to the US and have a property with a facility and just breed full time and do some importing, but mainly import just for more breeding stock, right? Yeah, that would be the goal. I would really like to relocate to the US.
Yeah, where would you think in the US?
I don't entirely know. Like, I want to say Florida, but Florida's got some crazy stuff going on. Like Texas area seems like be somewhere, you know.
Florida was great until about 10 years ago, and then I mean, it's the restrictions there are just, they're so draconian and they're always changing. That's the worst part now, is that they've set this precedent of like outlawing a species at the drop of a hat, like to where you're fresh out of luck, you know, like with the monitor, with some of the monitors, like the tegus and the green iguana, you know, even the pythons. There was no fight in that. They just said, all right, you're done. And then it was like, oh, shit.
It's absurd. Like, the environment's perfect, but the rest of the place is
yeah.
But no, I don't know. Yeah, I would have to figure out specifically, but I don't know. Texas kind of area seems somewhat appealing.
Yeah. It's going to be a weird transition to go from Canada -40 in the winter to being in the South. Can you handle the heat?
I don't know, man. I hope. Like, that last winter, we had a cold snap and we hit -54. Dude, it was crazy. You know what I mean? It's hot as hell in here. And my doors were iced over on the inside. Yeah.
Dude, I would be so terrified.
Oh, it was horrible, man. Yeah. Like, you can't walk your dogs or nothing, right? Like, they just gotta shit on the floor.
Yeah. Sheesh. I mean, props to you for doing that. I think when I lived in Chicago, I think there was one day ever that hit like -50. And it was, I didn't sleep that night. I was so terrified that my animals were going to get too cold. And I was in a basement too, which a little added extra protection there. But for that to be the normal, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it's Nina, knock it off. Yeah, it's not by choice. I was born, so I had to live with it. But yeah, not a winter guy, man. I would like to be somewhere where you could be outside all summer or all year. Like, because here you can only ship animals, right? Like, for less than half the year. The rest of the time, I'm only selling locally, right? Which is, you got all this farmland. So really, like, the market it's tough in the winter.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sometimes here, the winter's almost even a better time to ship than the summer, especially here in Texas. Yeah. I mean, January will be like mid 40s at night and like mid 60s during the day, and just, you're cool, you know?
Yeah. That would be all right.
Yeah. Trust me. That's my first non-winter, and I will never go back. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. But so the last thing I want to ask her, what are like a couple of species that are on your list as far as things that you need to work with that you aren't right now?
Bolins.
Yeah.
Like 1,000% Bolins. Some of the other ones on my dream list, like, I mean, I built my collection around what my dream collection would be.
Sure.
So there's only a couple other species I got to add, which, I mean, 2 of which are already in the works. I'm just waiting on a buddy to produce them.
Okay.
But Bolins are up there big time. And then, not really species, but I'd like to add albino white lips and albino olives. Okay. Which somebody in Canada just got a group of albino white lips. And I don't know them. I don't know who it is. I'm like, who the hell that I don't know got albino white lips?
Were they the T positives from
Alexander or whatever? Yeah. I was like,
I didn't know that any of those made it over the Atlantic. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, dude. I thought I was gonna be the guy, but
yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I would like pure basins. Like, I have a hybrid, but I mean, I think that's about it. I obviously would like to pair the Uinoi.
Yeah.
And the Obor, like, that's.
Yeah.
But species wise, yeah, I don't think that's it. I got a Madagascar ground boa. I need a female for.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's tough.
In Canada,
I could name you 5 people in the States who have them.
Yeah, I've had this male, and every year I feel terrible for him. When my females are receptive, my female Dumerals, that male paces his cage for like a month and a half to where, like, his scales get a little bit flared and the cage is like staticky, It's like, man,
yeah,
you almost just want to let him breed something. Like,
yeah, I've seen hybrids, and they're neat. I mean, you'd want to
beautiful, but I couldn't do it. like 2 Appendix 1 animals, I was like,
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. But yeah, those Madagascar ground boas they're incredible. Well, anyway, I don't want to keep you too long. We really appreciate all of your time tonight.
Yeah, phenomenal episode, man. Thanks.
For anyone who wants to keep up with everything you're doing, where can they find you on the internets?
In regards to, like, all the stuff that we've spoken about, the best for me is my Instagram, which is it's just _reptile_shop.
Okay.
My website is not up to date. And then my Facebook my reptile Facebook is the Reptile Shop Red Deer. And then that's the store business. So that you won't see as much of those weird projects and stuff.
Sure.
But Instagram is really where it's at. That's where I'm most active too.
Cool. Hell yeah. Well, dude, once again, thank you for your time tonight. If you wouldn't mind sticking around until we're off the live, I got a couple things to run by you. But again, this is awesome, man. We really appreciate your time tonight.
For sure, of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. Hell yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw you backstage and close it out with Alex here.
Easy.
All right. Dude, that was awesome. That was definitely one that is gonna need a second listen. There's a little bit too much information in there for the first pass through.
Somebody I have learned from once told me, if you're not the dumbest person in the room, you're hanging with the wrong crowd. And I very much have felt like the dumbest person in the room this entire episode, in a good way, though. Like I said, I got to rewatch, re-listen. I got to take some notes. Like I said, as the fall, winter pairing season for snakes at work occurs, I'll definitely be shooting him some messages. Yeah. But yeah, he knows his stuff. And another keeper where I just feel like the results speak for themselves. And
Mhm.
I just, it's cool. Again, like I was saying, from seeing that video almost 7 years ago and just casually following through Instagram. And then when you started doing this podcast, I was like, you got to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And definitely a good episode for the books.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was great. So same question for you. Where can everyone keep up with you on the social medias and keep up with the projects?
Pretty much Facebook, Instagram, and Fauna Classifieds, just at my handle, Alex's Agamids. That might be changing in a few years because I'm not going to lie, I'm looking to get myself incorporated. And I'm working with somebody where I might be continuing on their brand. So I'm just trying to figure some of that stuff out because I don't know. I'm not producing animals on a large scale to where I need to make a business of it yet. But with the way that I'm trying to grow my collection, it'd be kind of nice to have it all be organized in a way. But I want to do it right the first time, you know? So for now, Alex's Agamids, Facebook and Instagram pages. Do not add me on social media because I'm hardly active on any of those. Just follow the lizard pages and I'll respond to messages on there, or you can shoot me an email from there. But yeah.
All right. Hell yeah. Well, dude, thank you again for co-hosting tonight and for putting this whole podcast together. And let's do it again in not the too distant future.
Sounds good, man.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, have a good night.
You too.
All right. All right, guys, there's the episode. Another one in the books and a great one at that. For us here at the Trap Talk Reptile Network, please give us a subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on the audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio content. There are podcasts here 7 days a week from a list of some of the best hosts in the game, covering a wide variety of topics within the reptile industry. So there is never a shortage of top tier reptile podcast content. For me personally, you can find me on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd or just Stephen Kush on Facebook. And it's really about it. That's it for this week. And tune in next week. It's been a long night for another episode. So thank you everyone again for tuning in, and we'll see you all back here next Wednesday.